And we're live. Anyhow, and it generally takes a few minutes for people to start popping on and kind of thing. And
Sure.
so I know that you're on in the mountain in West Virginia driving right now, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if we lose you, we'll understand why.
No, I
And
just pulled off the road so I could talk.
okay, good, good, because you're at the top now.
Okay.
There you go. Good. So Jody, I know a good bit about you, and I think that we've had you on in the past,
Yeah.
and but still, go ahead and tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your service. I mean, if you want, whatever you want to talk about, because I know you're a faithful man. I know that you've served several terms in Iraq, I believe, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a mountaineer by birth, state of West Virginia, and I grew up in a little town called St. Albans, West Virginia. My father is a retired pastor, but's always been a businessman at the same time. And I never wanted to follow in his footsteps, and yet I ended up following in his
Doing that,
footsteps, both
mhm.
business and the ministry. So my
Except you're not retired yet.
no, not retired yet. My dad's still not either. I call him retired, but he goes out at 6:30 every morning. He just doesn't work like he used to.
Right, right.
Um, yeah. So I grew up in West Virginia, went to college in Kentucky, got my master's degree in Wake Forest, North Carolina at the Southeastern Theological Seminary, entered the United States Army as an Army chaplain, and served there for about 10 years, and went to Iraq as a chaplain. And when I was in Iraq, I had a stroke, and they retired me, sent me home, started my own supermarket. My father was in the supermarket business, so I decided to start my own. I did very well in that, and ended up deciding to take a large city church and as a full-time pastor there, and was a full-time pastor there for 2 years before I was so bored I thought either I'm going to jump off a bridge or do something worse, because I just, I craved being back in the business. So I bought another supermarket and sold my half of the big one to my brother in law. And at one time, we owned four supermarkets.
Oh, awesome.
And then I ended up buying five car washes, a tire store, started an auto dealership, started a recon dealership, had three full time detail shops. Anyway, you get the gist of it.
And lots of
One time,
employees and all of that as well.
yes, I had 36 employees in my supermarket and 42 in my detailing business. And anyway, a lot of employees. um, and I've bought and sold 14 businesses so far.
Awesome.
And I have a pressure washing company in the um, big town of Charleston, West Virginia. And that's a joke because Charleston is less than 40,000 people.
Mhm.
And so it's just a spit in the wind compared to most cities. And
You can't make a living in a town like that though, can you?
no,
It's
absolutely not.
impossible. Yeah,
Right. So I owned a franchise business to begin with pressure washing, and I didn't really intend on getting into the business, but a friend of mine who owned this franchise had three vans, and he was wanting to retire, and he wanted to sell his business, and times were tough here in West Virginia because all the coal mines were shutting down. No one was buying businesses, and no one was, getting loans for businesses and stuff. And so, long story short, just so that he could retire, I bought his business to help him out. And he did in this franchise, he did 110, 120,000 a year, and that was a big deal. I
mhm.
can remember that back then, it was 2003, I believe. They were giving these little trophies out, and they looked like a piece of clear crystal glass. and it was the $100,000 club. And that was literally a big whopping deal,
Right.
and I thought I just want to you know do $100,000 a year. That was my goal. And the first year it was horrible. I spent $52,000 in advertising, and
Wow.
still didn't do $100,000 in business my first year.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was really a learning curve.
And can you share what franchise that was?
Um, I'm not allowed to say
No
because I
problem.
signed the
Yeah.
contract, but if I were allowed to say, I'd say it was Sparkle Wash. But I'm not allowed to say that. So anyway, I won't talk about it because I'm not
Yeah. No,
allowed
no
to.
problem at all.
You understand what I'm saying?
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
but if I were, you get the gist of it.
You
Um,
know, there's not very many franchises in the pressure washing arena, really, uh,
right,
and fewer in the soft wash arena side of it. Kind of a thing. That's why I
sure,
was curious, even though I knew
yeah,
that was kind of a taboo question because most time you can't
yeah,
discuss and talk about and all that
yeah.
kind of stuff.
It's funny. I fell um, about 30 feet, and I broke my back in three places, and it
Mm.
broke it on my tailbone, my lower back, which is really a painful thing because that's where your pressure points are when you're bending and everything. And so I never thought that I would ever, you know, first of all, I didn't know if I was going to walk again.
Mhm.
And then once I figured out I was going to walk, I didn't think I'd ever be able to pressure wash, physically and climb buildings and all that. So I sold all of my equipment to a friend of mine, and he just retired from his business.
Oh, cool.
And I sold it for almost nothing just to be a blessing to him. And so about a few months later, a guy from my church gave me a call and he said, "Hey," he said, "I need you to come and wash some cars for us." And I was like, "Wash some cars? Are you kidding me?" And he said, "No, I'm not kidding you. I'm serious." And I said, "Man, I've sold all my equipment a long time ago. I'm not in the pressure washing business anymore." And he said, "Well, you need to just come down here and look at this." He said, "We're desperate for somebody that we can trust to wash these cars." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not really interested." We just kept being persistent about it. And they have a car auction in St. Albans, West Virginia called the Capital City Auto Auction. And I went down there just to pacify him. And at that time, the semi truck washing, fleet washing business had gotten so competitive, so cutthroat that guys were washing tractors for $10 and trailers for
Wow.
15. So it was $25. And I mean, it was just killing everybody. People going out of business because they were just too cheap.
Yeah.
And so I told him, I said, "What can you get for a car?" In my mind, $2.50, like a car wash lot or something. And so I went down there to look at them. These cars were spotless, and I'm like, "You want me to wash clean cars?" And he says, "Yeah." He said, "But these cars are transported from Kentucky to West Virginia. There's going to be days that it's going to rain on them. They're going to be spotty. There are going to be days that they're going to have bugs all over them from being transported. There's going to be days that they're going to be a little bit dirty." And I said, "Yeah, okay. How much would you give me to wash one of these cars?" And he said, $20 each. I said, $20 each. How many do you have a week? And he said, "Well, on an off week, there's 100. On a good week, there's 125, 150. On a big week, there'll be 200. I'm sitting here thinking that's 100 and some $1,000 a year.
Mhm.
And so I had a friend of mine who had just started coming to our church, and he was just over substance abuse, long story short. And so I thought, this man needs a job. I'm going to put him to work. So I called him, and he said, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "I'm sitting here in my living room and I was just praying, asking God if he would give me a job. And if he did, I would be sober. And if he would trust me, then I'd go to work." And so I said, "Well, that's why I'm calling you, because you're hired." And he was my first employee. And he's still sober now since 2003.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so that was wonderful.
Well,
And so
go
we
ahead.
started with those 100 cars. And as of this year, we detail the cars. Literally, we drag the trash out, we vacuum them, we wipe down the dashboards and the seats and the door jambs, and we put tire shine on them, we wax them, and we send them out. So literally this year we've been averaging eight, whoops, lights are going off since I'm parked on the side of the road. We've been averaging 800 cars a week.
Oh, wow.
Makes pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And this last Friday, the owner of the company comes, and we've been doing half of the cars there, and we had a competitor doing the other half on the other end of the lot, and it's a 96-acre car parking lot. Can you imagine that?
That's a big
Uh,
lot.
Thousands and thousands of
Mhm.
cars, and so
I can visualize that because of the floods here. They put all the cars in one area,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
exactly.
miles of cars.
Yeah, exactly. And so he calls me Friday, the owner of the business, and he says, "Man, you've really been faithful." And I said, "Well, thank you. I appreciate that." And he said, "The other guy hasn't." And I said, "Okay, what do you mean?" And he said, "You got 100% of our business." So we have now a 10,000 square foot detail shop
Oh, wow.
with 3 lanes with lights on both sides overhead. I mean, it's beautiful. And so we also have our other business there. And this year, minimum, we'll do about $1.2 million at this location. So that's my number one account, to say the least.
Very awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got to
So
take care of that.
yeah, I got to take care of that. And what's so funny is the guy in our area. Um, oh, come on now. Let me turn these lights on again. My truck. There's another guy in my area who used to be my largest competitor, and we got a call about 3 months from a company called Fleet Wash International.
Mhm.
And the guy calls me and he says, "Hey, can you take on the Fleet Wash accounts in your area?" Well, I thought my area would be Charleston and a few surrounding, places. Well, I said, "Sure, I'd love to." This was before I knew the big job was coming. And so we took on all the Fleet Wash business. This guy just stopped showing up. And
Wow.
our first day, we did almost 300 tractors and trailers in Columbus, Ohio. And,
Wow.
I live in West Virginia.
Right, right.
So,
A
so
little bit of a haul.
I had to send out 5 trucks for that to get it knocked out in the timetable that they wanted, and 10 guys. And so they did an awesome job. And so we took it from there and we grew that business the last 3 months. So we're doing that business. And then the last winter, I bought out this guy's brother's pressure washing company. And now we've got this giant company. And we may buy out a window washing company in the next few months. And so, long story short, the reason that I was sharing with you that we're buying all these places out and we still have plenty of labor is because um, we have plenty of help. And I'll tell you that this is
There's
like
no
an.
way you have plenty
Uh,
of help. Everybody's complaining nowadays. Everybody complains
I've
about
got
labor.
I've
No,
got
there's no way
guys
you
I've
got
got
plenty of help.
guys I've got guys lined up waiting to get a job with us. They take numbers to get a job with our company,
That's awesome.
and who they are guys who are convicted felons and guys who are in drug recovery houses. I used to, when I started my business, I used to hire homeless vets because, I'm a veteran.
Mhm.
And the one theme that I found in these homeless veterans' lives was addiction. They're homeless because they were addicted to substances. And so I made friends in the addiction world and contributed, to their homes and things like that, financially and otherwise. And before you know it, I started hiring folks out of these recovery homes. And they go through criteria to get into these homes. They're not just any homes, they're church homes. And so they have to be sober, and they have to go through the detox program. and they have to stay sober for 3 months before they're inducted into these church programs. Once they're inducted into these church programs, if they're there by court order, they have to stay for 6 months. If they're there because they voluntarily want to stay there, they can come and go as they want, but they can stay up to 2 years. And I have had guys come in and they've stayed for their 6 months, and then they've moved out of those homes, and we've gotten them apartments and places to live. And then I've had guys to stay for 2 years in those homes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had one fella who's been working for me. He was my second employee when I opened my pressure washing company.
Oh, awesome.
And he is self sufficient, self everything. Others I have helped go to college, and they're doing well in their careers. And others have gotten, I've got all kinds of messages, sorry. Others have gotten, married. I joke him occasionally because one, I joke him because he married a nurse, and I call him he's got a nurse with a purse, but they've done very well, very, very,
Mm-hmm.
extremely well. Now, listen to this. The homes that I get them from, they do a urinalysis test once a week, and they have the option to test them at any given time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a
Mm-hmm.
week. So for me, that gives me a pure drug free workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they know that they're going
Most
to
of,
be tested, so they can't do anything. Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And most of these guys, when I get them, don't have a driver's license anymore. The state of West Virginia had so many people addicted. We were the number one state for the opiate war. And we had so many people addicted that now the state is helping these men after they've been in recovery for 6 months to get their license back. Well, guess what? They take their driver's test in my Porsche. I let them have
That
my
is awesome.
Porsche, and they take their driver's test in my Porsche, and they're learning. I drive them up there and get their learner's permit, and I tell them, if you can get your license, then guess what? I've got a driver, you know. So
Absolutely.
I've got this constant revolving door of people coming in and people going out. Unfortunately, I have to admit, I've had guys that all of a sudden they're the best employee in the world, and 3 months later, all of a sudden they're gone because they've tested hot, and they're back in prison, they're back
Mm-hmm.
in jail. And so if you're,
But you know that going in, that when you're hiring
yes,
somebody that's in
yes,
that addiction realm, that
that's
there's
that's
a high.
right.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you get any sort of subsidies or anything like that, any incentives, governmental or otherwise, that um, would it help, not just for you, but if I wanted to bring them on? Because I know that there was a program with veterans that was that way. You could get subsidies and all that. Is there something like that in place for the rehab places?
There is, however, I don't receive any of that.
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm sort of a how would I say this nicely? I'm sort of a hard head
Mm-hmm.
that I don't like control. I
Government
like
control.
run I like running my own business, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't like folks trying to control my men either.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, um, I'm getting ready to start my own recovery houses,
Oh,
uh,
awesome.
because some of the homes that my guys are in now were wonderful to start with, and now they're putting such restrictions on them that they can't even hold a job down.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I hire a guy, I start my guys out. I guarantee them 40 hours a week. I guarantee them $15 an hour. I buy them breakfast, lunch, and dinner while they're working. I provide their clothing. And in return for that, I demand that they're loyal to the company. I demand that they're hard workers. I demand that they're there on time every day. And I set the parameters up front. There's no guessing. And they peer one another in and out of the group, so that if one person is not performing, four of their buddies will come to me and they'll say, hey, this guy's got to go. He's not carrying his weight and we're having to carry him and we're sick of it. And he's gone. And they know that. And so
And
there's a
that's something that
culture.
will absolutely happen in those types of groups and communities. They'll if they're trying to better themselves and they've got
Yes,
one person that's not towing the line, you know, it kind of changes the way. It's no longer ratting on them anymore. It's, hey, I am ratting on you. I'm saying, and typically they'll talk amongst each other first before they even come to you, and they'll say, hey, look, man, you got to get this isn't working. You got to get back in line. This is a good place to be. You don't
that's
want to
right.
mess with all of us.
That's right. And it becomes, instead of it's Jody's company, it becomes, this is my company.
Mm-hmm.
They have ownership in their company. And the performance is just phenomenal. I mean, I probably have half of the employees that I should have. And
Yeah.
they work overtime. You know, some of my guys are working 50 and 60 hours a week because they want to. But their performance is just phenomenal. The first big step for me in growing my business was getting off the truck. I didn't want to get off the truck. I loved being with my guys. And I thought that was a big step. Let me tell you what the biggest step was. The biggest step was walking away from the business and trusting someone else to run it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you
Yeah.
talking about something scary. That was the scariest thing that I did. I have a guy named Sean, and Sean, I can't say enough good about him. He's been in recovery for 2 years. He's getting ready to get married. I'm his best man
Oh, awesome.
in the wedding, and he's getting married in February. And Sean has been sober now for a little over 2 years, and he is the most talented young businessman that I've ever met in my life. And I thought I was good at business till I met him. Um, I'm not a salesman. I'm an organizer and encourager, but Sean literally runs the business. He is like a gentle warden when it comes to the guys, and he knows, you know, how to challenge them, when to and when not to. We were standing one day at our job location, and this guy comes in and he looks fine to me. Sean snaps his fingers and he points to the truck and he said, you get back in that truck and you get off the parking lot. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? Well, the guy was high and I didn't know what to look for. Well, Sean knew exactly what to look for.
Right. Right.
And so Sean sent him home. Well, the very next day, the guy went back to prison because he peed hot at
Mm-hmm.
the house. And, I've never been in that culture and I wouldn't even know what to look for. But
Right.
Sean was so protective of my business, then my radar went up. Wait a minute, this cat's different. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I
He's
need to
taking care
encourage
of it.
him. He's a leader and he's taking care of it. So then I gave him more responsibility from there and even more responsibility. And one time, Sean is nothing to, to tackle. I mean, I wouldn't want to fight him, even though I've been trained to fight. He'd probably kill me.
Ah, it looks like we might have lost Jody for a minute. He'll come back on, I'm sure. But that's an interesting thing, and one of the things that I think, and when he comes back on, we'll talk about it a little bit. Where how do you when because I actually hired from halfway houses myself at one point in time, and some of the hassle, and there he is. You back? I think your audio is out. Try it again.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I got you.
Okay. People are trying to call me. My
Ah,
mother's ill, and they're blowing my phone up, so I apologize for that.
no problem. Your mom is sick. I know this. Everybody else out there doesn't know that. And
Right.
like I said, if you decide you got to go, then you got to go. And um, family is always more important. But so somebody is asking, where are you based out of, Jody?
Repeat that question
Somebody was asking
again.
where you were based out of.
You got me now?
That now I'm catching you. Yeah, yeah. Your phone must be going crazy.
Okay, good. It is. It
Somebody's
is.
asking
Go
where you're
ahead. I'm
based out
sorry.
of.
Oh, man, I'm based out of
Where's your
Charleston, West Virginia. Yeah.
right?
Charleston,
Mhm.
West Virginia. Yeah.
So let me ask you
Yeah.
this. Um, I know myself, I had hired some from a halfway house. And so one of the biggest issues that I had was they didn't have the driver's license, like you said. So I
Yes,
had to physically go and pick them up every single day. Um, as somebody that has at the time, one or two employees, you don't have a whole bunch and you can't, that's a little bit harder to deal with sometimes. And
it
they
is.
also had,
It is.
specific rules like time that they had to be back, which we could bring them back anytime as long as they came back with us and that kind of a thing.
Right.
So we could literally kind of sign them in. We didn't have to actually get out the truck, but they would see them pulling up with us and that kind of thing, making sure they were with us, or they would
Right.
call us. Say, were they just with you? So um, and for me, I also had a little bit of difficulty with them, like you said, a little bit of a revolving door sometime. So,
Right.
what kind of advice could you give to say how to pick and choose, or do you basically just go with the flow and take whatever you can get?
No, no, absolutely not. Um, when I started my business, I literally picked up the one employee that I had from a recovery home that was from a recovery home. But after that, um, we had a driver from the recovery home at all times who would bring the other crew members.
Hmm.
And that driver usually was a person who was there longer than the rest because he got his license, and
Yeah, his license.
he was responsible for bringing that crew. Now, in our recovery homes, if you think you're going to miss an AA meeting or something like that at night, there's 7 o'clock in the morning meetings all around Charleston that you can go to, and that will fulfill your obligation for that meeting day.
Hmm.
So a person theoretically could come to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and work until 8 o'clock at night, as long as they go to that 7 o'clock meeting. And my
Hmm.
guys are on parole. I have, several of them that are on parole. And I know that they go to an 8 o'clock parole appointment, usually the first Tuesday of the month or whatever day that it's scheduled. And I've got it on my Google Calendar. And I will know, and their manager will know, that they're not going to be, at their job site until about 9:30, sometimes 10 o'clock. But that's okay. We're flexible.
Hmm.
There's nothing that's life and death that they can't, show up a little late. But you know, it is so interesting because whenever I do my intake process, I fill them out a resume and I help them fill out a resume. Even though I'm hiring them, they fill out a resume. And the first thing is their education. Some of them have no education, didn't graduate high school. Some of them have master's degree plus,
Hmm.
um, from one spectrum to the other. The second thing I fill out is a family background. The third thing that they fill out is skills and talents. And it's interesting, I've got a welder, I've got a plumber, I've got an electrician, I've got carpenters, I've got, you know, across the board. So I've got houses that I flip also, that I buy houses, and these guys go up and they work at my houses that we flip. And there's nothing, I mean, I can't think of anything that these guys cannot do.
Hmm.
When we took over this new building that we started today in, there were outlets that were not working. The people who were there that got kicked out, um, they had ripped the sinks off the walls and the commode was tore up and all that. Well, I had a guy who was a plumber replace all the plumbing fixtures and
Wow.
sinks and everything. I had my carpenter hang up, towel bars and toilet paper holders, and I had my electrician wiring back up the electrical outlets that they had cut. And, most people, it would have taken probably 2 months to call a plumber and call a pipe fitter and a welder and stuff to get this done. And we knocked out, and I say we, my manager, Sean, he knocked it out in one day while I'm up there visiting my mom in the hospital. So it's just amazing that they put their talents together.
So two things. Ray is saying when it comes to addicts and people in recovery, the old adage, idle hands do the devil's work. That is
Yes,
very, very true. And keeping them busy is what helps keep them out of
absolutely.
trouble. And so
Absolutely.
that's where I could see, especially doing the 50 and 60 hours a week, they don't necessarily want to be in the recovery house. They'd rather be working for you and making some money and, doing something more on the productive side and keeping their minds off of the drugs and the alcohol and the things that they are doing wrong, so to speak.
That's right. When they are not working, I will have them to hang out with me.
Mm-hmm.
I will have them to go and not just go to baseball games or we do all that stuff for fun, but literally we will just literally go out and hang out somewhere at times. If my
Right.
if my wife has something at our church that she's got a woman's day or something like that, then I'll grab 5 or 10 of my guys and literally we'll just go hang out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting that the transference of life skills is really just being with people.
So
And
it's more of a whole different culture that you're breeding that's helping to
that's
keep
exactly
them
right.
as a cohesive family.
That's right. And they don't want to go back to the recovery house and stare at the walls by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be with somebody. We are social animals, by
Right.
nature.
Mm-hmm.
And
So Brad is asking a question. This was a question that I was going to have as well. But do you
okay.
let your customers know that you have felons and parolees on their property? And then he says, in my
No,
opinion, everyone deserves another chance, but not all people think that way.
no. And it's interesting. We do Loomis Security, we
Uh-huh.
do Wells Fargo, we do Brinks, we do all kinds of high security locations. They're fleet washing and stuff, and they don't know it, and they've never asked, they've never demanded anything of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because some of these people that are really in high security areas, they'll call me and say, "You have the most respectful and disciplined people that we've ever dealt with, and they're professionals." And I'll say, "Thank you." And that's all I say. No, I really don't let them know anything. It's not their business.
Great, great. Ray was over there. He just got back from robbing one of your trucks. That's what he's out for.
No,
Yeah,
never
yeah,
had
yeah.
it happen. Never had it happen.
No, I mean, because that's one of the things that I prided my company on as well. Now, I hired felons, but I always made sure that they were 5 years clean. Meaning, if you were a felon, you had to you had to be 5 years out of prison, and
Right.
all your things and all that. Other than when I was doing the halfway house stuff, but for the long term, great for me, I think a lot of it is about giving second chances. I think a lot of us have done things when we were younger, or
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
We're
If we would
different
have gotten
people
caught,
as
we'd
we
have been
age.
in jail.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, and I do think people have the ability to change. There's some people you can look at them and you can tell, yeah, you're not going to change. That's why I really like what you were saying about the whole resume thing. Okay. They're coming to you. They don't necessarily have a resume, or even if they hand you a
Right.
resume, I could see taking that resume and, okay, let's do a whole new one. Okay. Here's what I want to hear. Here's what I want to know. Here's what, and having them do that resume where you're walking them through those questions and the answers that you're looking to get. For me, that's how, when I'm interviewing, it's the same kind of a thing, except I never thought about doing that, having them make up a resume right there with me. But you sit down and you get to know them as people. It's not a standard.
That's right.
First of all, I make them jump through some hoops to even get to an interview process with me.
Yes.
But once they get there, it's not a, where was you, what was your last job? What was, all those kinds of things. It's, tell me a little bit about your family. Tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about, what kind of things do you like? Do you fish? Do you hunt? And get to know them.
That's right.
You see them start off the interview and they're all up like this, and then they relax, and then they start talking to you, and it becomes a one-on-one, friendly communication, if you will. And that's how you get to know them as a person. And that's when you sit down and you start having that conversation, and everything is grand and golden. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that MF, man, I tell you, and you can see how their body language and all that is going to be towards the customers and clients. And then you tell them at that point, that's how I do it. Look, we don't do the language here at this place. And so if you can't curtail your language, then it's not going to work out. And then I go on with the interview.
Our church ministry takes care of that. Mm-hmm. I don't have to do that. They know if they show up that, they're already in a church setting and there's no profanity or anything like that allowed. So, we really have some terrific recovery homes. And this might shock the socks off of you, but I have taken felons directly from the jail cell into my business.
Yeah. No, yeah. I can see the point of it.
Yes. And the funny thing is, there is so much similarities that I can almost forecast within 3 months, 6 months, what these guys are going to do and how to handle them now, because I've been doing it for, about 20 years.
Right.
And it's interesting when they first get out of jail, if they've had a long extended period of time, they don't say a word, and they're just like this. They're just closed. They don't want to give you any information. They don't want you to know anything about them. And then after a few months, if you treat them right, then you watch what I call the flower blossoms. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, then you start seeing the personality come out. Mm-hmm. And then before you know it, it's just like he's one of the guys, and it begins to talk, begins to share. And before you know it, you know his heart. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're about. It's not about washing cars. It's about changing lives and changing hearts. And that's why I think our program has worked. And I literally have guys lined up who want to work for our company. And yes, Raymond, we treat them with the utmost of respect. I had one guy, his name is John. I'm not going to give you his last name because he's working for me right now. But John will tell you, he came right out of prison, and I don't know if he was changing batteries or whatever 5 years before he went into prison, but the only shirt he had looked like it had battery acid eaten up. And he shows up to work, and he's got the shirt on that looks like the battery acid has eaten it up. And his blue jeans were, almost as bad. And I told the guys, I said, guys, I need John to help me today. I said, my back's hurting and I need to mow the grass. And, that's not anything unusual. I'll do something like that. And I'll give him $50 extra for coming to my house, So I took John immediately to Rural King, and I bought him 5 pairs of jeans, and I bought him undershirts, and I bought him about 5 shirts, and I bought him a couple baseball caps, and I bought him a couple coats. I bought him a pair of boots, and I bought him wool socks. And I told him, you ever tell anybody I did this for you, I'll kill you. And he just laughed, And the guys know what happened because I did the same thing for them. Mm-hmm. But that's the way that I treat my guys, and that's why, and sometimes they miserably fail, and I've lost my money, and I feel like, oh my gosh, they took advantage of me for about a half a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And then I don't regret it.
Because you realize there's a much bigger picture there.
And then I've got a friend for life. Mm-hmm. I've got a friend for life.
Yeah. So And Brad's bringing up some great questions. What about murderers and sex offenders? I mean, is there a line that you draw with, okay, if you've done this or you've done that, you can't be part of my program?
Our recovery home does not take sex offenders.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I've not had a murderer work for me that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
But those two things, I could not, in a good conscience, take them to someone's house,
Mm-hmm.
especially the sex offender. Believe it or not, I hate sex offenders worse than murderers.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But I could not, with a clear conscience, take them. And we also do whole school systems. We you know, it's nothing for me to do 10 or 15 high school, um, stadiums and things like that. We just got a contract for 274 subdivisions.
mm-hmm.
And we're going to do them every year, 3 years in a row. I couldn't, with a good conscience, with all those kids playing around there, take a sex offender
Mm-hmm.
to those. I just couldn't do it.
Right.
So
And
yes,
think,
I do have a line to draw. The guys that work for me right now, one was a car thief. I could go through all the crimes, a lot of drug related things, but never had a murder or sex offender. No. And like I said, the sex offender, believe it or not, bothers me worse than anything in the
oh
world.
yeah. Well, and I think that as far as that's concerned, and don't quote this as being gospel, but most sex offenders are they say that they'll reoffend. It's one of the diseases that you just
Yes.
it's not really something where you can rehabilitate. Most of them will reoffend, and I'd be the
Sure.
same way. I'm not. I couldn't, in good conscience, have somebody that has done that. Um, Now, I can admit that if they came to me and said, "Look, well, here's the deal. I was 19, she was,
Right.
16,
16.
and
Yeah.
it was kind of one of them
Yeah.
things that happened, wasn't I could probably look at that differently,
Right. Right.
but aside from that, if it's a forcible, yeah, I couldn't, especially if it's, a child or that's one of those things that would just yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
That
I
would
agree.
boil. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyhow,
And it's
I
funny, Michael J. Owens. I can't read it very well. Maybe
yeah.
it's
Says I
Evans.
never had
It
children of my
says,
own, but I've raised a bunch of men from misfits.
listen, when you're in the recovery home, um, I call it a ministry because I'm a pastor. That's exactly what you're doing, Michael. Um, the reason I say I feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner is we sit literally around tables and we talk during those times. And that's when principles and life transference of skills and ability to deal with things takes place. Most of these men were from dysfunctional homes and they turned to substance abuse. And I would dare say 90% or more. A lot of these men did not have a good father figure, a functioning
Mhm.
father figure in their home. And they call me boss affectionately. And a couple of them even call me dad. And they kid about being, they'll say, "Is that your son?" And I'll say, "It sure is," when we're out on
Mhm.
the job site or something.
Yep, they
And
all are.
they'll whisper under their breath, "I wish I were," or "I'd be so lucky," or something like that. Because literally, Michael, you hit the nail on the head. You have absolutely raised a bunch of men from misfits, and I agree wholeheartedly. That's what we're doing, and I love it.
Hmm. So, what has been the most re- rewarding thing that you have had happen with hiring specifically from the halfway houses?
Oh gosh, I could spend all night talking about that.
Mhm. That,
Um, I I think one of my first guys um, graduating from his program. That was the first program I helped graduate a guy from, and I bought him because he was always crazy about um, English cars and, cars that weren't running off of 12 volts and the 6-volt systems and all that. I bought him a Jaguar when he graduated, and he ended up um, being a cook in Florida at a VA hospital.
Oh,
And
awesome.
his life's dream was to be a chef, and he was awesome. And the next one that I had that worked for me, he never had the opportunity to go to college, so he went back to college, and he became a forest ranger. And so I'm not going to tell you where he's located, but you've got a forest ranger out there that used to be a heroin addict who
Yep.
now is a wonderful forest ranger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, being the best man at my general manager's wedding in February is going to be one of the highlights of my life. Um,
That's awesome.
uh, I mean, I could just go on and on and on and on and on. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, there's been some gut kicks.
Yep.
I've had the stuffing kicked out of me and been let down, um, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And like I said, I'm buying up other businesses that can't find laborers, that can't find help. You know, so
So, how difficult is it actually to how difficult would you say it is to train and to keep because if you have let's look at it not from your standpoint, okay, and the reason I say that is that you've got several employees that can pick up the slack of somebody. So what advice would you have for somebody that maybe has that's a single owner operator looking to take on one or two guys, um, and the fears that they have about hiring from a halfway house? And before you answer that, I want to go to Raymond's point here. It says you're doing exactly what Christ instructed us to do, and I think that that's something that all of us should. That's where I think this show and what Ray and I try to do most of the time is try to. It's not necessarily about talking about Christ and not necessarily about that kind of thing, but acting in a Christly way and treating people with dignity, respect, honesty, integrity,
sure.
all those kinds of things. And people are going to respond and react to that most of the time, although there are going to be those times when you just have a schmuck in the boat. So anyhow, back to the question, which I've already forgotten.
That's a good segue to the answer, because the answer is I put everyone in a 4-week probationary period. And I'm going to say this just bluntly. If our chemistry doesn't match the first day,
Mm-hmm.
I pay them for the whole week, and I tell them, God bless you, I'm going to be praying for you, but we just don't match, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And if at the end of 4 weeks, uh, the guys all say, boss, he don't match us, he doesn't have the same drive. They know if someone's there in recovery for the right reason, and they know if the guy's a fake. They know if the guy's giving them a line, a jive, and things like that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I started with my first guy. I mean, we just hit it off. We clicked, and we laughed at the same stuff. We were the same age, and we just clicked, and we became best friends. And then he helped me recruit the rest and pick from, oh no, don't hire that guy. He's a loser. You got to have this guy. You've got to keep him, boss, because he's carrying more weight than anyone in the group. And so with the first
That's a good
guy,
point.
I'd say it's chemistry, and the rest of them, I'd say it's chemistry. And the rest of them, I'd say
It's
you've got to
chemistry.
be one of the you've got to be yeah, it's got to be chemistry. It's got to be you've got to be in the wolf pack. And if
Yeah.
you don't fit in, the best thing that you can do and the most gracious thing you can do is to cut them immediately.
Cut the cancer quick.
You
That's what we
can't
always say.
cut the cancer quick. Rip the band-aid off, whatever
Mhm.
cliche you want to use. You are not doing them a service by keeping them. You are doing a disservice to them by coddling them and keeping them.
Absolutely. Raymond is saying the irony is we are all sitting here in amazement at what Jody is doing, which is amazing. But honestly, the plan has been laid out for us. He's truly the fisher of men.
Thanks, buddy.
Perfect questions, Doug. Exactly my situation, and that's just it. That's where I think. and I think this is really where it goes into where, and I think this is this way with any employee or anything that you do. You have to trust your gut. And I think a lot of times people are like, oh, no, I have to have this employee. I have to have this employee. And so they put up with things that they shouldn't put up
Yeah.
with or do things they shouldn't do. And you should generally know pretty quickly whether or not that person's going to work out. I typically say if you make it past 2 weeks, you'll probably be here for a little while. Because if you don't,
Hmm.
because I'll cut you quick as well, but I also have a kind of a stricter guideline to get in the door, which helped me out. And with long-term employees, kind of a thing.
Right.
Um, but I think in structure, you've talked about that before. You make sure that they know exactly what it is. Ray said it a little bit earlier. You have to set those. It's just like a small child, right? If the child comes over, you have to set the parameters of what they can do and what they can't do, and that there's consequences to their actions.
Yes.
And most people will deal with that very quickly, right? And so you can control your destination with your company by not, and you're not controlling the people. Let me be clear on that. But you're controlling the situation and the parameters of which it takes to maintain that job and to be able to stick with you and whatever. And I think that those are important traits to be able to make sure that you're doing those things.
That's right. You're exactly right. Yep.
And then
If you don't have the yellow lines painted where the middle is and the white lines on the side, then that guy can drive anywhere.
mhm,
So once you put those parameters down and you say this is the only acceptable parameter, because if you go off this road, then you're going to be in another person's road because you're no longer on our team. They
yeah,
understand that. Where do you find these homes? You find them at any local church in your community and call them and say, do you know of anybody that has a recovery ministry? Um, Another thing that we do that's not with the recovering addicts is we have a school in our area. They're continually looking for jobs for kids that will work from 8 to 12 and then they go back to school, or 12:30. And then we've got kids that come in at 1 o'clock for the second half of the day and they work from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And sometimes the 8 o'clock kids will come back and the 5 o'clock kids will work later. And what we have them doing is really hard. Are you ready for this? They rip all the trash out of the cars and throw it in the bag. That's it. But you know what? For $15, you can get a kid to work like an animal ripping
mhm,
those trash and they're high energy and they're funny and we play West Virginia's country, so we play country music real loud for them, and they think it's the coolest thing that they can come in and rip trash and vacuum cars. They're not allowed to operate machinery and things like that, but they can use vacuum cleaners. They can clean the cars out for us. We have 3 lanes of assembly lines that go through. When you're doing, 1,800, 2,000 cars, you better have a process set up.
mhm.
But these kids we also hire from your local school. So if you have a setup to where you can use kids for just a half a day like us, and
And
use
when
the
you're
other
saying
kids the other
kids, give,
half,
give me give me an age range of
high
those kids.
school, high
High
school,
school. All right.
9, 10, 11, 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Wow. You don't have, well, I mean, I guess, and look, just so everybody out there knows, different states, different counties, parishes, boroughs, all that have different
yeah,
rules, regulations, and you got to check with
right.
your locality. But I can tell you, one of my best hiring sources was it's funny because I love her to death, but she runs one of the local churches, and she when she first called me to come and look at doing some work for the church, she was all standoffish. She wasn't going to have any of it because I'm a contractor and she knows how contractors are, and
Yeah,
I respected where she was at with that. And I've told the story probably dozens of times on here, so I won't tell it again. But by the time it was over with, she's like a kind of like a sister to me, kind of a thing. And I used to call her my hiring manager, because I would just call her up, say, hey, do you got anybody? Because the
Yeah.
churches, a lot of times they'll have people that need that little bit of helping hand, or, hey, you know what, there's this person, and they're generally going to be giving you really good information about them. And a little bit different than the halfway house side of it. But I'm going to assume then that there are really kind of two different types of halfway houses. I'm making an assumption here. Maybe you can help clarify this. But the two different types of halfway houses that I have in my mind are one that rolls through the church, and the other that just rolls through for profit. And so, somebody such as yourself, you said you're going to start a halfway house. Okay, but you're a pastor. It's a little bit different. But let's say you weren't a pastor. Let's say you were just somebody that wanted to make money and you started a halfway house. So I guess looking at it from that way, I would rather be trying to get it from the church side of it, because I would want to know what their rules are for their, because
Yes.
you already said they help you already determine. They don't allow profanity. They might have rules against smoking, or where they can smoke, or, all these kinds of things. So would you agree that there are two different types of halfway houses, or are there more, or is it pretty much just one kind?
Well, let me tell you this, and this may surprise you. There are also two types of halfway houses within the churches.
Mm.
Now, it's terrible to say this, but I'll be honest, as a pastor, there are churches that do it for just a profit. That's my opinion.
Right. Well,
And there are people who are
money
not
creates
church
greed, and it
related.
doesn't matter.
That's exactly right. And it's not the church, but it's the people that they've hired to start this quote ministry. And man, they're making gangbusters of money. They get state grants, they get federal grants, they get training grants, they get this grant and that grant. And before you know it, man, they're making huge money. And they drift. To me, they've drifted over into the for-profit business instead of the nonprofit helping the guys. All of a sudden they figure out they can help themselves. It sounds like our politicians in Washington. They went there for the right reason, but now they're helping themselves.
One of my best friends passed of brain cancer many years ago, and he had done pretty well. He was worth somewhere between 15-20 million dollars. And he was the one that told me money changes people. And
Yes.
for him, you could never tell that he was as wealthy as he was. I mean, you couldn't tell that he was as wealthy as he was. And just like I told you, I had an employee that was a pastor, and he didn't tell us that he was a pastor, because he wants to see people in the light that they are. And that's the way this friend of mine was. He wanted to see you the way that you were. Instead of viewing him for his money, he wanted to know who you were as a genuine person, kind of a thing. And so
that's right.
Anybody, pastors can run off course, and anybody can. Money can create greed and evil.
And that's the bottom line, is whether you're dealing with the church or whether you're dealing with a felon who just come the first day out of prison, or whether you're dealing with someone who just came off a detox, you have to treat them as a human being with dignity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bottom line to me. And often if you find the right people, you don't want to let them go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That brings up what Gene is saying here, which kind of goes along that same line, because you're saying, you're treating him with dignity, decency, respect, all that kind of thing. I never thought about this, Gene, but Gene is saying those that are deaf is another great group to hire. We hired many in the restaurant industry. The majority also drive with their own car. Some of the best employees that love their job. Many programs where a translator comes to work with them to get things going. I never really thought about that, but because this would be another segment of people where, maybe they don't get as much dignity and respect as they, could get, should get, would get, kind of a thing. And so, Gene, I think that's so in looking at that, any aspect of people that have a, we talked about, of course, the halfway houses, the drug addicts, and, that sort of thing. The veterans, people that are deaf, maybe. I mean, I guess the hardest one really would be somebody that's blind, because they can't do those kinds of things. But there's also office work that could be done where, you could hire somebody from a blind community and things of that nature. So
Sure.
there's a lot of different things. This is opening my mind up even to the different areas where we could go for employees and get complete, absolute rock stars in the end.
I think I was one of the first guys that I saw that had girls on my cruise, my pressure washing cruise and stuff. I
Yeah,
thought that was cutting edge years ago.
yeah. I've tried to hire women, but they've not accepted the jobs. I had one that I really wanted. She did slate roofing, and I thought, man,
Ooh,
she'll just be a rock star. And
yeah.
she said it was going to be too hard of work, and I'm like, you install slate roofing, but it is what it is. So, Mr. Jody, I know that you've got someplace that you need to be. We're an hour into it, and I want to respect your time. And
Oh, that's fine.
I think the place you want to go is probably pretty important, what you got going on. So, um,
Yeah.
man, I really, really appreciate you coming on here. What are your parting thoughts for everybody?
Just if you have a family member, go home and hug them and love on them and tell them that they're the best thing in the world. My little mother is dying tonight. She is bleeding out in her brain. And so that's where I'm heading now with my four older sisters. I'm the only boy of the family, and the baby. And so we're going to be with Mama tonight. So just love your family tonight.
Well, our prayers are with you, Jody, and
Thank you.
give your mom a hug if you can. And man, we're praying not only for you but with you, and sure
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all for watching us, and y'all take care.